Welcome to Wisdom Unveiled.
Great to be here.
Today we're continuing our journey into the world of the Persian poet Hafez Shirazi.
Yes, drawing again from those fascinating conversations between Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani in the Maarefat audio series. Specifically, I believe, audio file 1 through 121, Mordad 1390.mp3.
That's the one. And just a reminder, folks, this is our translation of those talks, so, some subtleties might get lost along the way. We do apologize if anything isn't quite perfectly captured.
Absolutely. Feedback is always welcome.
This is actually our 21st deep dive out of 40, focusing purely on Hafez. And, we got quite a bit of interest from listeners about one particular Ghazal, especially connecting it to the time of Ramadan.
Ah, yes, that connection felt really insightful.
It really did. So insightful, in fact, that we thought, let's just focus today's deep dive on the very first two lines of that specific Ghazal. Seems like a perfect way in.
Agreed. A great starting point.
Okay, so let me read those opening lines in Persian. Amad, Ramazan, o Moqaddamash, Buse zanim, dar mekade hababa mandem, obi sobhash nazanim.
Beautifully read. So that first line, roughly translated, goes, "The month of Ramadan arrived, wine and tavern were shut down. Pleasure, joy, and wine fell to the time of dawn."
Okay, so straight away you get that sense of Ramadan's arrival, the closing of taverns. That's a very visual, outward social change, isn't it?
Definitely. It signals a clear shift in public life, a pause on certain activities, setting a different tone for the month.
Right. But then the second part, pleasure, joy, and wine fell to the time of dawn. It doesn't say they stopped completely, they just moved.
Exactly. That's the interesting part. It suggests these things aren't canceled, but maybe transformed or relocated to dawn.
Dawn, a time usually for prayer, reflection.
Precisely. So it points towards maybe a more internal, perhaps spiritual engagement, replacing the more public, outward forms of pleasure. A shift in focus.
It's like swapping external celebration for something more inward-looking during those quiet hours. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Have you or maybe listeners ever intentionally shifted routines like that, to carve out space for deeper focus?
That's a great question to ponder, that deliberate reshaping for inner work. Now, that second line feels incredibly packed. It says, "Years I followed the religion of the Rend until by the decree of wisdom I imprisoned greed."
Rend. Okay, that word definitely stands out. What exactly is a Rend? It sounds sort of mysterious.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And Dr. Dinani really stresses how hard it is to find a single, perfect word for Rend in English or other languages.
So no easy definition, then?
Not really, no. The meaning is quite nuanced, very dependent on how Hafez uses it in each poem. But, and this is key, Dr. Dinani points out that Hafez himself gives us a major clue right here.
Ah, in the second part of the line.
Exactly. The definition is almost embedded in the verse itself. And another thing Dr. Dinani mentions is fascinating. He says there are many religions, but all Rend share one mazhab.
One mazhab, like one path or creed.
Something like that, yeah. Suggesting a specific shared understanding or way of being that maybe goes beyond conventional labels.
And that shared path, or at least a huge part of it, is revealed right there. Until, by the decree of wisdom, I imprisoned greed.
Yes. So Hafez is telling us, in this context anyway, what defines the Rend. It's this act of using wisdom's authority, the fatwa-i Kherad, to control greed.
Okay, so a Rend is someone who puts wisdom in charge, uses it to rein in their own greed.
That's the core of it here. And Dr. Dinani emphasizes that a Rend is wise, they are Kherad. Wisdom isn't just an accessory, it's fundamental to being a Rend.
Right. So this Kherad, this wisdom, is it just about being clever, like having a lot of knowledge?
No, definitely not just. And Dr. Dinani makes a really important distinction here. It's not the outward surface knowledge, the zahir-i, like book learning.
Okay.
It's the deep inner spiritual wisdom, olavatin. It's more profound.
Yeah.
Like knowing the rules versus truly understanding the game,
Got it. So this deep inner wisdom, olavatin, allows the Rend to control hers, greed. Why the focus specifically on greed?
Well, Dr. Larijani talks about hers, which covers greed, avarice, maybe even excessive desire in general as being pretty fundamental to us as humans.
We all want things, basically. Money, status.
Right. Or fame, recognition even. Dr. Larijani suggests an excessive desire for knowledge itself if it becomes unbalanced.
Even wanting knowledge can be hers.
Potentially, if it becomes an insatiable, grasping kind of desire. In this context, hers probably stands for those negative, excessive desires that can lead us off track.
So not just normal wanting, but the kind of relentless craving that makes us do bad things.
Exactly that. Dr. Larijani points out that pretending to have no hers at all is likely unrealistic for most people. The real danger is when that worldly greed runs wild, unchecked. That's when it can cause harm.
Makes sense. Uncontrolled desire is powerful. Now, Hafez says he imprisoned greed Zendon Cardin. He didn't say he killed it Kashtan. That feels significant.
Oh, absolutely. Dr. Dinani highlights that word choice. Imprisoned, not killed. It strongly suggests that greed, or maybe this kind of base desire, isn't something you can just eliminate completely from human nature.
So it's always there, potentially, something you have to actively manage.
Precisely. You have to keep it contained, locked up, metaphorically speaking. You can't destroy the capacity for desire itself, maybe, but you can control the destructive expressions of it.
And how is this done? Through the Fatwa-e Kherad, the decree or verdict of wisdom. What gives this wisdom its power?
It's not just everyday thinking. According to Dr. Dinani, this Kherad gets its authority from that deep inner knowing, the Ola Baten. He uses this great image, seeking a fatwa, like a ruling, from the Piri Kherad.
The elder of wisdom, like asking your highest self for guidance.
Something like that, yes. Guidance coming from a higher, more aware part of yourself. This Kherad could be seen as maybe the result of a fully developed intellect, akli kol, or just a higher form of awareness.
Okay, so how do we get this? How do we cultivate this Fatwa-e Kherad within ourselves?
Dr. Dinani suggests one way is to follow the Mazhabi Rend, which he interprets as associating with, learning from, people who are genuinely knowledgeable, pure, spiritually aware.
So surround yourself with good influences, people who have that clarity.
Exactly. Because as he points out, if your own intellect is clouded by desires, by hers, it might not issue a very reliable fatwa. So learning from the clear-minded helps.
And managing this hers, this greed, is seen as a really big step in, well, in becoming a better human.
Huge. Dr. Larijani calls it a crucial stage in development. It's about redirecting that energy of desire away from the harmful stuff towards something better.
What happens if we fail? If we don't manage to imprison greed with wisdom?
The consequences sound pretty dire, according to Dr. Larijani. He warns we could lose our spiritual core, our soul's treasure, the Ganjai Raman.
Lose it to what?
To negative forces. Symbolically, Shayan, or just getting completely consumed by worldly, materialistic greed.
Like trading something precious for practically nothing.
Exactly. He uses the powerful image of Joseph being sold for a pittance. Greed makes us undervalue our true selves. He even compares it to hell, always screaming for more, never satisfied.
So being a prisoner of greed means losing touch with our higher nature, our spirit.
That seems to be the idea. Becoming enslaved by temporary things, forgetting our inherent worth, our divine connection, it's a deep spiritual loss.
That's quite a stark warning, but is there an upside? What if people do manage this?
Ah, yes. Dr. Dinani offers a more hopeful view. He suggests that if enough individuals could achieve this self-mastery, using wisdom to guide their desires,
Yeah.
well, it could fundamentally change the world.
How so?
Less corruption, more justice, more harmony. It all starts with that inner work, controlling the negative hers.
A powerful link between inner change and outer reality. Now, you mentioned earlier a listener connected this verse to Ramadan and fasting.
Yes. That was such a perceptive comment. The listener saw the connection between imprisoning greed, hers, and the concept of habzi nafsani.
Which means restraining the self's desires, right?
Yeah.
Essential to fasting.
Exactly. And both Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani thought that connection was spot on. Fasting is, in a way, practical training for imprisoning hers.
Like a workout for self-control.
Absolutely. And Dr. Larijani stresses this, the physical fasting alone isn't enough. It needs Maarefat.
Spiritual knowledge, understanding.
Yes. To make the physical act truly meaningful, transformative, it's not just about not eating or drinking.
So Ramadan becomes this training ground for both controlling desires and deepening that spiritual awareness.
That's a great way to put it. And Dr. Dinani brings in that amazing saying from Imam Ali. The fasting of the mind from wrong thoughts is superior to the fasting of the stomach from food.
Wow. So it's not just actions, but thoughts, too, controlling negative thinking.
Precisely. Abstaining from harmful thoughts, just as we abstain from food. And the faculty responsible for all this control actions and thoughts.
That would be the intellect, Eshq.
Exactly. Dr. Dinani points to Eshq, the intellect, as the key player here. Even logic itself stems from intellect.
But isn't there sometimes a view, maybe in some spiritual circles, that intellect is, I don't know, arrogant or gets in the way of real spiritual feeling?
That's a really common point, yeah. And Dr. Dinani tackles it directly. He argues that true intellect, mature Kherad, isn't arrogant at all. It's actually humble
Humble.
because it's self-aware. It knows its own limits. It understands what it knows and what it doesn't know. That self-knowledge, he says, leads to humility, not pride.
Okay, so Hafez, by emphasizing the Fatwa-i Kherad, clearly isn't anti-intellect.
Not in the slightest. He values it highly. And while he talks constantly about love, Eshq, which is obviously central for him, it doesn't mean he dismisses intellect.
So how do love and intellect fit together for Hafez? Are they opposites?
Dr. Dinani suggests they're not in opposition, they're complementary. He points to Hafez's own lines, like Daftari Akwahati Ishqut.
The book of intellect is the verse of love. So intellect can express love.
Or understand it, perhaps. And another line, Ukwala Nuta I Pargari Vujud. The wise intellectuals are the center point of the compass of existence. Shows intellect's foundational role.
Okay, so maybe love brings the awe, the wonder, the confusion sometimes, and intellect provides the understanding, the structure.
That seems to be the dynamic. They work together. But, importantly, for this specific job, imprisoning negative greed, that harmful hers, Hafez, gives the authority to Kherad.
To wisdom, to intellect, not to love in this case.
Exactly. Now, the longing for the divine, the hers for the beloved that Hafez also writes so much about, that's a whole different kind of desire. Positive, not the negative greed we're talking about here.
It's incredible how much depth there is in just 2 lines. Really gives you a lot to chew on.
It really does. I think the main takeaway is just how vital it is to cultivate that inner wisdom, Shirad, to be the guide for our desires, our hers. It seems key for personal growth and maybe even for a better world.
So, a thought for everyone listening. Maybe take a moment to reflect on your own desires. Are there any hers pulling you off course?
And thinking about how we can strengthen that inner wisdom, that Fatwa-i Kherad, especially during reflective times like Ramadan was for the original audience of this Ghazal. How can we make that inner voice clearer?
Which leads to, I suppose, a final question for us all to consider. How can we, practically speaking, in our day-to-day lives, really cultivate this decree of wisdom?
Yeah, what's a concrete step we could take, inspired by Hafez, to listen better to that inner guidance, to manage those desires and, move towards a more meaningful life?
Definitely food for thought. Well, thank you so much for this deep dive. It's been really illuminating exploring just these 2 lines.
My pleasure. Hafez always offers so much.
We hope it sparks some reflection for all of you, too. Keep exploring Hafez's wisdom, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive. Farewell.